Hey everybody, I think you guys might have figured out by now that Curious George is one of my favorite storybook characters. Curious George never meant to get in trouble, but he did, and he never meant to cause all the problems that he caused, but there you go. It happened to him, and then it all ends up being okay. And that kind of reminds me of my own boys. So there you go. I had a whole bunch of Curious Georges in my house. But they weren't monkeys, they were children. So the story I have for you today is Curious George discovers the ocean. And just looking at this cover, I see something interesting. Two things that are interesting. One of them, Curious George is swimming with a sea turtle, and that's pretty exciting. But then when I look at these other pictures, I see these are real pictures of things in the ocean. So this is a drawing. Curious George and the sea turtle, that is a drawing that somebody made. But these are actual photographs of deep in the ocean. Some little tiny fish. Here's some coral and some fish. And then here's a shark. So Curious George discovers the ocean, and this was written by Bethany Freitas. Who would have thought George would have his own scuba suit? George was a good little monkey and always very curious. Do you want to hear about the time George discovered the ocean? It's hard to believe, but the story starts in the sky. George had always dreamed of flying, so this was his lucky night. Sorry to pick you up so late, Professor Wiseman said, but a miniature weather satellite just crashed from space. It needs to be found right away, and I think you can help. George and the man with the yellow hat watched from the helicopter as their house got smaller and smaller below. They passed the city, the country, and the beach. Soon, they were flying over the ocean. Guess who spotted the ship first? Yes, George, there's the Epstein Pizza research ship just ahead. Okay, so they took a helicopter out to this boat because I think it's so far out in the ocean that they couldn't get there very quickly if they took another boat. Professor Einstein. Oh, it's the Einstein Pizza research ship, sorry. Professor Einstein and Professor Pizza looked worried. They explained the situation to George. The satellite crashed down close by, but no one is sure exactly where. It might have broken in the crash. That doesn't sound good, does it? What if the information and the photographs the satellite had gathered were lost? Should we help them look for it, the man asked. George couldn't wait to begin. If they were going to search the ocean floor for the satellite, they would need to take Pizza and Einstein's submarine. First a helicopter and now a sub. Today was turning into a big adventure. So look, there's George in a very small submarine. Some submarines are giant. That's the ones that we think about sometimes is the really big submarines. But this is a small research submarine that scientists might use if they're exploring. What do you think George saw through the sub's windows? There were so many things to look at. Fish, plants. Okay, George, the man said, keep your eyes peeled for that satellite. George tried to pay attention. Soon the submarine's sonar began to beep. Had they found the satellite already? That's not the satellite, George, Professor Wiseman said. Look, the sonar had found a giant sea turtle. The sea turtle is looking at the submarine thinking, what are you guys doing down here? It wasn't long before the sonar found the real satellite. We're getting close, Professor Wiseman said, but hold on, we have a problem. The satellite is inside that coral reef. Oh no, there was only one way into the reef, through a tiny passage. The sub was much too big to fit. George was so disappointed. The team returned to the research ship to make a new plan. If the sub was too big to get into the reef, they'd need something smaller. Do you have any ideas? George had one. He was small enough to fit through the opening. With a scuba suit, George would swim in, explore the coral reef, and get the satellite. George's scuba suit fit just right. It's pretty lucky that they had a monkey-sized scuba suit on that research boat. Your helmet contains a camera, microphone, and headphones. This locator will flash when you're close to the satellite, Professor Wiseman explained. We'll be able to see you on our monitor and speak to you the whole time. Are you ready? George was ready and excited. The swim fins helped George swim fast. He swam over and around the coral reef until he spotted the opening. You found the opening, George. He could hear Professor Wiseman's voice loud and clear through the speakers in his helmet. You should be able to swim right through. Once he was inside, George couldn't believe his eyes. Can you believe how many animals live inside the coral reef? So what do you guys see? How about that? Jellyfish? Look, it's just lots of different types of fish. Here's some of the coral. See, here's a real picture of some fish by the coral reef. All of this stuff is living stuff. With so many new creatures swimming around him, George never expected to run into someone he recognized. Exploring the coral reef was so much fun that George almost forgot why he was there, until he was distracted by a beeping sound. What could it be? His locator. It was flashing. You're getting close to the satellite, George, Professor Wiseman said. George and his new friend swam deeper. So do you guys recognize this sea turtle? It's the same turtle that George saw when he was in the submarine going down. George looked and looked. The satellite must be here somewhere. Suddenly, George noticed something strange. Shadows swirling around him on the ocean floor. What do you guys think those shadows are? A shark? I think so. Shark-shaped shadows. We were right. George was frightened. He wasn't sure if sharks and monkeys were friends. Don't worry, George. Those small reef sharks aren't hungry. The coral reef supplies them with all the food they need, Professor Wiseman explained. What a relief. George was so distracted by the sharks that it took him a moment to notice what was behind him. It was right there. He had finally found the satellite. So some satellites that are up in space getting information for us about different things are enormous. And some of them are pretty small, and this happened to be a smaller one. Professor Wiseman flew her helicopter over the reef and lowered a rope down to the sea floor. George grabbed on, and he and the satellite rode up out of the water, up to the helicopter, and back to the research ship. That's a scientist. She has a lot of money to spend if she's got a helicopter. George was happy that he found the satellite, but still, if it was broken, all that work and searching would be for nothing. When they got back to the ship, Einstein and Pizza checked the satellite. It's in great shape, Professor Pizza said. Not a scratch on it, shouted Professor Einstein. The research was saved, all thanks to George. Ahoy, George, they called to him from the ship. They wanted to celebrate, but what do you think George was doing? It had been quite a day. George got to fly in a helicopter, and that was fun. But he decided swimming in the ocean was even better because in the sky there are no sea turtles. So he found a friend, just like George makes a friend everywhere he goes. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know this is one of my favorite stories about the ocean. Okay, bye. I'll see you later.